cost-efficient energy systems.
The Mobile Telecommunications Code 2023 has recently been implemented in Barbados, aiming to improve consumer rights and protections in mobile telecoms industry. This code sets out guidelines for service providers to ensure fair practices and transparency in their services. Welcome to the People's Business. I'm Teshia Hinds. Tonight, we bring you the latest updates and discussions on important issues affecting our community. Now, joining us for tonight's discussion are Consumer Protection Officers Julia Regis and Deryck Anderson, both of the Fair Trading Commission, and the Director of Consumer Protection at the Commission is also with us. That is Dava Leslie Ward. Good evening to all of you and welcome.
Good night. Good evening.
Good to have you with us, and of course we'll encourage you to be a part of the discussion as we get into it as well. So we'll take an early break, and after this we start the discussion. Stay tuned. Welcome back to tonight's discussion. Tonight we are delving into the Mobile Telecommunications Code 2023 that's aimed at really safeguarding consumer interests in Barbados through mobile telecommunications, through the mobile telecommunications industries. So let's get going with you, Ms. Ward. Talk to us a little bit about why it came necessary for us to pursue this particular code and get it to the place where it's at today.
Well, first of all, Teshia, I want to say thank you very much for having us on the show. For us at the Fair Trading Commission, the Mobile Telecommunications Code has certainly been a labor of love, particularly in the Consumer Protection Division. For us, we are very well aware, like everybody else, that mobile telecommunications is rapidly evolving and consistently so. So what we wanted to make sure was that as that competitiveness and innovation occurred within the industry, transparency and fairness essentially kept pace with that. So it is with that that we decided that we would develop the Mobile Telecommunications Code. And I would like to say first, generally, codes are used internationally by consumer protection agencies when they are seeking to essentially govern the interactions between an industry and their consumers. So for us at the FTC level, when we looked to develop the code, we wanted to establish some minimum standards that would promote transparency and fairness that are not necessarily found within the Consumer Protection Act. So you see that the code, it's not legislation, it was actually done voluntarily, but it goes beyond the protections that are currently found within the CPA, so that the users of mobile phones will find that they have enhanced protection as it is. So from our perspective, we like to think that the mobile code is essentially an opportunity for the consumers of Barbados to have protection that specifically address the challenges that they face. And the code in of itself, it tracks and addresses all of the issues that a consumer can have along that customer journey. So from at the beginning, where you have an offer and you see an advertisement, it tracks those issues, all the ones in between. And even after you've contracted and you have issues or complaints, your code deals with that and everything else in between.
All right, that's a great deal, but I'm happy to hear that we are here with this groundbreaking code, because that most certainly is what it is. So let's move over to you, Ms. Regis. Talk to us about what's contained therein. How will this code protect consumers in Barbados when it comes to telecoms?
So, Keisha, what we would have done, just like David said, we looked at some of the issues that we were getting from consumers. We looked at the billing, we looked at overbilling, because some persons will have overbilling charges on their bills at some point in time, and they are not aware, they don't know where they're coming from. We looked at those things, we looked at the contract that you and I would have to sign, and there may be complaints. How do you address those complaints? Even the notification limits, when you enter into a contract and you have a data limit, the notifications that you should get when you reach a certain target, all of that is contained in the code.
Now, I'm told that it was rolled out in 3 phases, with the third and final part of it being or coming into effect from April 1st. So talk to us about why you thought it was necessary to roll it out in that way, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. Good night, Keisha. Well, essentially, what we can say is it was important that consumers of Barbados have a greater understanding for the objectives of the code. And because of this, we decided that we would do it in phases so that, one, the consumers will be able to easier adapt to the conditions, and the service providers as well. So that is basically why it was set up this way, just so that implementation would be able to be seamless in such a way that there's not much give and take, but rather it will be a seamless operation.
Well, go a little deeper for me and talk about how you've handled each phase and how it's been received.
I could answer that question.
Yes.
I'd like to just point out that, as I would have said to you at the beginning, it tracks every aspect of the consumer journey. So some of the early parts of the code that had been implemented related to the first point of contact that you would have as a consumer. You see an ad, and you are induced or you're encouraged to go and make that purchase. So that was one of the first things, because we realized that that is the beginning of the customer journey. So we wanted to make sure that that whatever is contained in the ad is transparent. You want to make sure that, essentially, as we Bajans say, what you see is what you get. And that is what the code prescribes. It stipulates that whatever the consumer is offered, essentially, must be provided in that ad. So you know that sometimes you can get some disclaimers. For example, you might see some person saying free phones for everybody this Saturday, or there might be some type of promotion, but then you get a little fine print disclaimer which suggests not applicable to existing customers. Now that would be the type of disclaimer that would not be allowed, because what it does is essentially nullifies the main message. So those types of things are not allowed within the code. So we wanted to make sure that from at least from the early stage of it, the consumers, that first interface was addressed. As we went on through then to the customer journey, different parts were adopted. So that right now we're in phase 3, which is the final phase of implementation. So at that phase of implementation, we're looking at that part where you've gone into the store now and you definitely want to make a purchase. Essentially what will be there is when you go into the store, there's going to be a document now called a summary of important information. And that sets out for you a snapshot of all of the main terms and conditions which you'll be bound by. Now, the reason why we wanted to have that is because we recognize that consumers oftentimes don't have the opportunity to read an entire contract. But if you get a 1 or 2 page document, you'll look at it. So that summary of important information, that is limited to 1 or 2 pages. Now, obviously, as you go on through the customer journey and you have contracts, the company is free to their heart's content. They can give you 40 pages, 50 pages. Now, realistically, I don't think they would do that, but we have that snapshot. So that is one of the phase 3 implementation, along with one of the most important phase 3 implementations, which is the consumer notifications that Julia would have spoken to.
All right, so that speaks really to contracts for consumers and kind of simplifying them, which is one side of things. We know even from operating online, a lot of the times we don't necessarily read that fine print. So are you saying that the code is even speaking to typeset, font size, and things of that nature to ensure that customers are able to follow what's in the contract?
Yes, Keisha, that is what we want the service providers to do. Really, they have to give this information in plain language. And that's one of the prerequisites of the code. So all of this information, we don't want consumers to doubt what they're signing on to or have two meanings or they thought it was that and it was not that. We don't want that. So the service providers right now have an opportunity to remedy these situations, so that when consumers go in at the end of this phase, all of this important information, all of the documentation is in compliance with the prerequisites of the code. So that is what is happening right now.
All right, Mr. Anderson, how has the new rollout been received by consumers and telecoms providers here in Barbados?
Well, so far we can say that the operation has saw its merit. We have undergone educational efforts in this regard, and we have started out with going to secondary schools just to, because each and every person, we all have cell phones. So that's a good place to start with the young ones, because we understand that the youth are the leaders of tomorrow. And if it is that they're educated about the code, it is a likelihood that, for the future, we're better prepared. But we didn't just stop there, but we did begin with the school students, just ensuring that they're educated on the code. And moving forward from that, we also sought to ensure that consumers were also educated. We interacted with the consumers for our World Consumer Rights Day. And with that, we partnered with DCCA, which is the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, OPC, and BNSI. And with this, we were able to reach out to consumers as well, so that they are not only educated on the telecommunications code, but they were also educated on AI as well. But moving forward from this, we also have to ensure that we cover things on all different aspects. So not only with interacting with schools, not only with interacting with the public, but there's other mediums of digesting information. And so we sought to ensure that we will also do videos as well, so that's another avenue. With this, we have created a wonderful character that I'm pretty sure, or I'm happy to know that all of Barbados will be able to know. The name is Freddie from Fairfield. When you see him pop up on your pages, whether it is Instagram, Facebook, we just hope that you listen to the different aspects that Freddie from Fairfield will be able to disclose to you. With this, we have actors such as, Tony Thompson, Janine White, Aishaka, and further from this, we also entered into the International Consumer Protection Enforcement, just to ensure that more of the telecommunications code is addressed and shared. And this is a proud note. The Commission is a finalist in this international award, and we also sought to further educate consumers and the public at large through where we are right now, we're on the people's business. So thank you for the opportunity. And and we have also engaged with the Pensions Association. So it's a busy time. We're continuing to do work, but we're just ensuring that the public is educated and that the effort is well accepted.
And I would imagine it will be ongoing because we're really going to have to keep at getting this information out to the general public. For you, Ms. Ward, talk to me a little bit about the specific protections for consumers. If we can delve into that a little bit more. I know that a part of where this has come from was out of the many complaints that you were getting from consumers. So what are some of those very specific areas that you've honed in on within this code?
So, Teshia, you are 100% correct. We had lots of complaints. So if I could just go back to that complaints just a little bit by way of an example. We noticed that between 2013 to 2015, we had approximately 24 complaints attributed to the mobile telecommunications sector. But then from 2016 to 2019, that number almost tripled where we had 86 complaints. So some of the issues, one of the main issues we had seen was the consumers, they really did not, they were unable to keep up with the data notifications. They had no idea that they could even set their phones to notify them. So we had a lot of cases of persons who had excessive charges. Persons were complaining that they did not understand the terms and conditions. Or some people are saying, well, I signed up for this plan so long ago, I really don't even know what it is about. We had problems related to even getting through to the company in terms of having complaints being heard. So all of these things, that is why I can tell you, that's why we track the entire consumer journey, because we wanted to make sure that all of the complaints that we received, it tracked each point of that journey, and that is why we did that. So specifically, I think Julia would have mentioned the data notification. So once you reach 50%, 75%, and 100% of your usage, you're going to be notified by the company regardless as to whether your provider is Digicel or Flow. And it is important to note that these notifications may be 48 hours old. So if you get your 50% notification, know that that might be 2 days ago. So we advise you, when you get that, carefully monitor your data usage. One of the other things in terms of having complaints, once a consumer sends a complaint now to a service provider, the complaint must be acknowledged within 2 days. And once you have that acknowledgement, then they're supposed to investigate and come back to the consumer within 10 days. Now we know that that is, in a perfect world, things happen, and sometimes it is the issue requires a bit more of an investigation. So what the service providers are required to do is that they are supposed to go back to the consumer before the expiry of that 10-day period and advise them that there's supposed to be an additional time, and they will specify that time. And there also must be a way for consumers to be able to track the progress of the complaint in of itself. So these are some of the main issues that we would have addressed. I believe Julia would have indicated that we also address things such as billing, because one of the issues that we know that sometimes happen, you get a bill, but you might know that your bill is usually a certain amount. So let's say it is usually $50. We would encourage you, even if you haven't gotten your bill, to go ahead and pay. However, if your bill is late, the service provider has agreed to extend the time in which you are given to pay your bill. So it does not mean that you don't have to pay. It just means you have an extension of time. Because if there was a particular month and you know, for example, that you might have exceeded your plan in some way, or you might have used more minutes, and those if you don't have your bill, that is not something that you would know about. So the important thing is that the consumer now has an extension of time to pay once their bill is late. So those are some of the main changes that have been made and included in the code.
Well, those are most certainly some of the main areas that we hear complaints about in the media as well quite often. Well, the discussion continues. We're going to take another break, and when we come back, we'll prepare to take your calls and comments. You can call us on 228-5562 and 228-5563. So get close to your phone lines. The discussion continues after this. Welcome back to the People's Business. Tonight we're delving and deep diving into the Mobile Telecommunications Code 2023 and its significance in addressing consumer complaints and dissatisfaction, among other things. So we are going to encourage you to get your phone calls in, 228-5562, 228-5563. We have a panel of experts from the Fair Trading Commission, specifically from the Consumer Protection Department. We have the head of department and two officers who are ready to answer all of your questions about this new code and how it was rolled out. So let's go straight to the phone line and take a call. Good evening to you. We'll encourage you to listen to your television and listen to your telephone and not your television. Otherwise, there might be a delay. So good evening to you. Welcome to the People's Business. Go right ahead.
Peace be unto each and everyone.
Good evening.
I'm calling about, especially for the elderly. You know, they will top up their phones, and I think it is 3 months. I don't know if it still is to give you, and if you don't use the money, they take the money off. And to me, I don't feel that is right, especially for the elderly. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll send that one over to you, Ms. Ward. Did you hear the caller? Basically, what she was talking about, the top-ups where you're only allowed to use the data for a specific amount of time, and she talked about how it would impact elderly people specifically if they're only given a specific amount of time to use the data. I think she said 3 months or so.
Yes.
So in a case like this one, we know that this was an issue that we did look into a little while ago. So internationally, there are usually limits on when and the length of time in which you can actually top up your phone. So what we would advise consumers from time to time, especially those older consumers, if you know that you don't make a lot of calls, keep your top-ups to a minimum. Now, I understand how persons feel, but what we have asked the service providers to do is to provide a date when you top up so that you know when that amount is about to expire. So what we're asking the consumers to do is also to exercise some responsibility, because we know that with rights you also have responsibilities, and make a note for yourself, and you can have put an alarm in your phone and make sure you know when that phone is when the amount is about to expire. I think for most service providers, if you add a nominal amount to your phone, you will be able to keep your data and your credit. So that is an important point to know for consumers who do use the top-up service.
All right, before we take another call, sorry, you wanted to add something, Ms.
So just add something to that. We know that there are seniors amongst us. What I would advise is that they too get their family member, some family member, to check their phone. They know what have top up the phone. We've asked for a date to be put for the expiry time. So that someone keeps an account or have an idea when that amount will be expired. So they are on top of things when they do top up their phone.
All right, so the short answer is there has been no change to the service providers being able to put an expiry date on the data.
Right, there is none, but this is well in keeping with international standards. So when we looked at that, and we did, this was a deeply debated issue, but we felt as though, considering that it was among the international standards that we had seen, what we did ask the service providers to do so that the consumers themselves don't lose is to notify the consumers upfront when that expiry date would occur, so that you can, so it is not a case where there's nothing that you can do. But as a consumer, you just have to make sure you know when that date is, put that alarm in your phone and top up so you can have your credit rolling over.
Okay, so just to be clear, to be absolutely clear, we know that we're going to have data notifications as a part of the new code. Does this fall within that, where there should be a notification that this data package you've signed on to is about to expire?
So most of the times when we have those data notifications, this is in the context of a plan. I believe that most of the persons who have I believe that some persons who do top-ups, they also have a plan. and it's usually maybe for a week or a month. But the real mischief that we were seeking to address is those excessive charges. Because you would not believe, but we actually had some consumers who ran up charges in the thousands of dollars. One person I can remember from memory, they had approximately $35,000 in charges. So what we're really, the mischief that we're looking to address is we want the consumers, especially those who could exceed their plans, we wanted them to be able to have a limit, a way that they can stop their plan from going to that amount where they then have an obligation to the phone company to pay thousands of dollars. That was the real mischief there that we were trying to stop. For those persons who enter into let's say you have a pay-as-you-go phone, you should get that notification letting you know when the package will expire upfront.
All right, let's take another call. Good evening, welcome to the People's Business.
Good evening, welcome to the panel. My phone is cut off and I put on the 15th of the month with Floor, and Floor shall bill the whole amount. What do you think about that?
All right, thanks for your call. Basically, the caller said that she put her telephone on halfway through the month. The 15th is the date she gave, and she was still billed for the entire month.
Okay, I'm not sure.
To answer that one correctly, we would have to get some more information on that, because that does not provide the information. I'm not. What I'm hearing, did she have a package before, and it was cut off, and then it was reinstated? I am not too sure.
Yeah.
What do you call it?
Was it a pay-as-you-go package, or did she have a plan, a contract? So is she a monthly billed consumer? We need to have all of those variant details, because we really can't give an assessment of it unless we have a little bit more detail. So I don't know if it's possible for them to call back and provide those details.
All right. So we're going to ask callers as well, if you're going to share some information, maybe something that happened or questions about the code itself, but most certainly where there are problems that you want to get solved, it might serve better to contact the FTC after tonight's program, because as they mentioned, they will need to have all the variables to be able to really truly weigh in on any challenges that you're having right now. With that said, though, I'd like to throw out this question to you, and it might be for you, Ms. Ward, or others on the panel might be able to answer. Talk to me about the role that the Fair Trading Commission plays in enforcing the Mobile Telecommunications Code and therefore protecting consumer rights.
So we knew that this was going to be an issue because everybody's going to want to know what are the teeth. So there are varying methods of enforcement that we can use, and I understand how this could be a concern, particularly since we've said that it is a voluntary agreement that the service providers have with the commission. So at a first glance, no, if the issue within the code is one which is analogous with an issue within the Consumer Protection Act, we can utilize the full suite of redress that is available in that act. So for example, when we're looking at advertising, if there is some type of false or misleading representation made in an advertisement, even though it is covered in the code, because false and misleading advertisements are also addressed in the Consumer Protection Act, we could use the CPA to resolve the issue. That could mean we could do an investigation. Coming out of that investigation, we could take the matter to the magistrate's court. Depending on what the issue is, we could also take the matter to the High Court. Again, we could also do an undertaking. The Commission has, in very recent years, especially in relation to consumer protection matters, we've done undertakings. That is where a company has found to be in breach of the legislation, and then they were required to remedy that breach and take action so that the entire organization, staff, management, everybody is trained on the legislation, and they have a plan for complying with the Consumer Protection Act going forward. In addition, there are also informal warnings that can be issued under the code. There are formal warnings. And finally, what some might call name and shame, we also have the opportunity to publish public notices where a company has breached the code and they have failed to fix it within the required time. Now, with that, I want to say that generally speaking, once we have contacted Flow and Digicel equally, and we've highlighted various issues to them, I would have to say, usually, most of the time, to a high extent, 99%, 99.999% of the time, the company has taken our advice and followed our directives, and the matters are usually resolved.
All right. Well, that most certainly is good to hear. We're going to take a break here. It's time for another break, but we want you to stay tuned and we're going to continue to take your calls. We have a full slate of calls holding on, so please don't hang up. After this break, we'll take your calls as we continue this discussion on consumer rights. Tonight, we are taking a closer look at the code, the telecommunications code that's just been instituted at the beginning of April. Stay with us. Tonight, we're diving deeper or introducing you, as the case might be, to the Mobile Telecommunications Code 2023 and its significance. We're going to go straight back to the telephone lines. As we said before the break, we have a full slate of calls, so let's take it on in. I know telecoms are, a particular point of interest for many of us here in the community. So good evening to you. Welcome. Go right ahead.
Good evening. Hello.
Yes, ma'am. Go right ahead.
Yeah, this lady called back.
Sure.
I've been in hospital for 2 months, so I pay a service to keep the number. But it's after 3 months, and you then pay for the number, you lose it. So then when I turn back on the phone, the 15th of the month, they still bill for the whole month. So they never bill for the full amount, they bill half.
Was it, I think what they want to know is if it's a package, as in a prepaid package, or a postpaid package that you had?
It's you pay by the month for it.
Okay. So it's what a lot of people refer to as a bill phone. Are you hearing this?
Yes, it's a bill phone. It's a bill phone.
Yes,
No,
we're hearing
we're
this.
not hearing.
I'm hearing the consumer.
All right.
I'm
So let
not
me
hearing
pass
the
this over to you, Ms. Regis, then, since you are hearing the discussion.
Yeah, so she's saying that she had a prepaid package and she was hospitalized and was unable to pay her bill. And then after she was discharged, she paid the bill, but she was billed the full amount. And what I will say to you, ma'am, caller, is that at the beginning of your contractual arrangement, you would have said to the service provider that you would pay them a specific amount on a specific date. If there was a challenge and you recognize that there was a challenge, you were hospitalized. What should have happened? If you couldn't do it, you should have asked somebody to do it. But what would happen is that the service provider is still expecting their monthly charge because that was the agreement you made. What you can do, what I would advise you to do though, you can give us a call tomorrow. We're open at 8:15. Give us a call at the end of this program. We're going to give you the number. Give us a call and we will be able to speak to you a little bit more on it and see where we can help you with this. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Okay, so you can give me a call tomorrow and I will be able to speak to you and to see how I can address you on this issue.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you for calling again.
All right, let's take another caller. There's another call on the line. Good evening to you. Welcome. I think we lost that call. All right, so while we get the calls lined up once again, I know that for you, Ms. Ward, you mentioned that the agreement is a voluntary agreement with the service providers. Let's talk a little bit more about that. What does that mean in real terms?
So essentially, it means that it is a law. So if you look on the law books, you will not see a law called the Mobile Telecommunications Code. However, what the service providers have done is they've signed on to the code, so they have agreed to be bound by the terms and conditions thereof. So it means that, let's say, for example, let's say with the user notifications, if the code stipulates that if the service provider does not provide you with the notification within the specific time. So let's say you would have used 100% of your data and there's still more months left, but they did not notify you or for whatever reason, the notification was not sent to you and your bill then goes over the slated amount. The code stipulates that the service provider cannot bill you at the out of plan rate. Now, the out of plan rate is usually significantly more expensive than the in plan rate. If they have not notified you, the service provider still has to charge you at the in plan rate. So the charges will be significantly less. So even though the Mobile Telecommunications Code is not a law per se, the service providers still must be bound by the terms and conditions of the code. And I also want to point out, Teshia, that we did not at the commission just develop the code and institute it on the service provider, so to speak. What we did was we wanted to make sure that the document would be workable. It was developed in-house at the commission's offices. But what we did, we brought both providers to the table, and you can imagine how those discussions, we had some robust discussions because you're bringing two providers together who are fierce competitors, and I must commend both of them for working with us and working through the process. We also have a number of stakeholders. We invited consumer groups. We had a social commentator on the team. We also had some governmental agencies as well. And we all sat around the table, the proverbial table, and hammered out the details of the code. So this code was made with the service provider's knowledge. They had the opportunity to comment on it. They made suggestions. Some of the suggestions they made were accepted, some were not. And ultimately, once the code has been signed on to by any service provider, we require them to follow the tenets of the code.
All right, most certainly a very, very interesting process. Let's go back to the telephone line and take another call. Good evening. Welcome to the People's Business. Go right ahead.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
The query is about if I have any complaints about not getting service for about 3 or 4 weeks. Will I be billed for that?
Sir, I'm hearing that you're saying that you didn't get this, you didn't get service for 3 or 4 weeks.
Yes.
What you should have, if you haven't done it already, would be to contact the service provider. If that is still happening, or even if you would have your service was connected and you're not hearing anything from the service provider, just like I said to the other caller, give us a call tomorrow and we will be able to speak to you directly on that and have the matter rectified for you.
Okay,
All
thank
right.
you.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much, caller.
I just want to make it clear here, Teshia, that this mobile code speaks directly to you're using the phone for personal use and not for business purposes. And that's our legislation also. We are only looking at for personal use and not if you're using it in your business arena.
All right. I know an area that a lot of people usually talk about specifically, and we've been talking about excessive charges for calls, data notifications, billing, and things of that nature. But I know a point that a lot of people usually talk about specifically is roaming charges. Talk to me about where things like this fall into the code, because I myself have had some questions through the years about how charges get into the thousands of dollars without there being any type of notification. Some people will argue that they didn't even have their phones on, but as long as there was a voicemail service, for example, it was the explanation in place, then charges were still accruing. So, talk to me about how you were able to deal with things like roaming charges, which account, I would imagine, for a big bulk of the complaints that people make.
So how we would have, we did get a lot of calls for and complaints for roaming charges, and in some instances it was where persons were on cruises. So in doing the investigation, what we found is that some, going cruising, there's no roaming package really for cruising because you're going from country to country. So there may not be a roaming package available for that. However, if you are going by air, what we are advising consumers, because there's a responsibility that comes with it, the use of your mobile phone. If you are traveling and you want to use your phone, what you should do, contact the business. And they're making it easy for you now. You can go, you see that you can send a WhatsApp. You can go in person to the company, let them know you're traveling, what date you're traveling, when you're expected to be back, so that can be put in place. If you do not do this and you decide, I'm taking my phone, I'm going to use my phone, and some persons will say to us, oh, I had it on airplane mode, but then, I just opened it once just to check that. You need to be mindful that once you're in another territory, you're in another jurisdiction, you're going to be using that provider. And you will be charged then in that provider's currency, and that's where you're going to see the bulk of the billing. So you need to be mindful. If you're traveling, notify the service provider that you are, so that you can put a plan in place for that and minimize those excessive charges. So the company knows what is happening. So you need to be mindful. Some persons, in one of the instances, the person was going from country to country, but only had given one country. So they were covered for that country, but the other countries that they would have visited, then they incurred the roaming charges. So you need to be mindful. If it's going to be more than one country, say, so that you can be directed and put those things in place beforehand. If not, and that is one of the reasons why we did it, so that you will not incur these hefty charges when you return, because they will be billed in the other jurisdictions' currency.
Also, to add
Ms.
to
Ward,
what Julia
yeah,
is
I saw you
as
adding.
well. All right, I wanted to make the point that this is one of the reasons why the code is so important. The code specifies in section 2 of the code that there is now an emphasis on having written documentation. This is a requirement. So when you go to purchase your roaming plan, that plan should also be documented in writing, so you can have an assessment of what the plan covers. Because I know there would have been consumers who would have indicated to us that they went to purchase a plan. They might have said that they were going to one or even two places, and they expected that the plan would have covered that. However, once they actually came back and they saw the charges, they realized that the plan only covered one place. So in a case like that, when you're going to get your roaming, you should also be given a document which outlines the exact terms and conditions for your roaming package, and that should also be able to help you to make an informed decision. Now, if you go to the service provider and you've asked for a roaming package and you don't receive any information pertaining to that, please contact us at the Commission, because we are now in that phase of monitoring the code, and we want to make sure that everything we have in this beautiful 32-page document is being followed. So information like that from the consumers is very important to us. But believe me, if the consumer complains and tells us that they have not received something like that, particularly which could be detrimental to the consumer in writing, that is something that the Commission will seriously consider and will have to deal with the matter with utmost urgency, because we do have that requirement for these documents to now be in writing.
Is this also covered under the data notifications that must be given? Earlier we talked about giving notification of a data package coming to a 50% place or, greater. So will this also be covered under the notifications that must be given?
No. Unfortunately, it doesn't relate to roaming. And the reason for that is that the service providers, so Flow and Digicel, they are only notified of the charges by the providers in the jurisdiction after the fact. So they have no control over determining the amount of data that is used or even getting that information. That information is shared with whatever provider they use when they're overseas, and then it's sent back to the service provider. So it is not possible to extend the data notifications to that. Now, obviously, we know that telecommunications changes quickly, and that is something that could possibly change with technology in years to come. But at this particular point in time, the data notifications are strictly for local purposes. That is the reason why we've made it mandatory for them to have the information about the roaming package in writing, so that you can understand exactly what it covers, so that if it doesn't suit your purpose, your best bet is to turn off your phone, don't even use it, and possibly even buy a burner phone when you get to the location. And that way you don't incur those charges.
All right, we're going to encourage those of you who are on the telephone lines to stay with us. We're going to take another break here on the People's Business and come back. Don't you move.